immigration concerns, doubling the sugar tax, and South Africa's latest economic freedom ranking revealed. All of this and more in this week's episode of Free Marketeers News. Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Chris here with another Free Marketeers News Roundup, where I'll go through some of the biggest social and economics news items of the past week for the week ending 17 September 2021. A reminder that next week, Friday, the 24th, is a public holiday for those of you who aren't aware. So, just a bit of a heads up for next week. Jumping into this week's episode, the first news item, there are talks that the sugar tax might be doubled in the coming months. A few years ago, the health promotion levy or sugar tax was introduced by the national government in 2018. This tax was introduced to decrease the demand for sugar sweetened products among South African consumers and, as a result, drive down obesity levels. There has been little to no evidence produced by government to date that shows that the tax has had the desired effect on obesity levels. In fact, the SA National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, released in May this year, revealed that more than half of South Africans gained weight over the past year, largely due to the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 lockdowns. Conversely, there is ample evidence of the dire impact of the sugar tax on the already struggling sugar industry, including small-scale growers. A report commissioned by NEDLAC, the National Economic Development and Labour Council, shows that in the first year of the tax's implementation, there were 16,621 job losses across the industry and 9,000 job losses in the cane growing sector alone. Most of these job losses have been in communities living in rural areas where poverty levels are highest. The report also highlighted that the sugar farming sector's output had declined by a cumulative 414.2 million rand as a result of the sugar tax, while the sugar processing sector's output had declined by a cumulative 772.1 million rand by 2019. The sugar tax also resulted in a decline of 653 million rand in investment into the economy. Of concern is that these findings only cover the first year of the implementation of the sugar tax. Therefore, these figures could possibly be higher as a result of the tax still being in place 3 years later. And it is very concerning that government and certain civil society organizations are looking at doubling the sugar tax in a country with 44% unemployment rate. That kind of thing would, in my mind, be unconscionable. Moving on to our next item, economist Mike Schuessler has highlighted the impact of price increases. Government-administered prices are clearly keeping inflation in South Africa structurally higher and would constrain a move to a lower target band, according to Mr. Schuessler. He pointed to July's CPI index, which incorporated the latest annual increases in municipal charges, including water, electricity, sewer services, refuse removal, and asset assessment fees. Mike said, and I quote, "These are all considered administered prices as they are determined by the government and are not subject to market forces of supply and demand," end quote. Stats SA reported that households would, on average, pay 13.7% higher for electricity effective 1 July 2021. The increase is more than double that of the previous year and above the average increase of 10.8% in 2009. Schuessler went on to say that if these tariffs, which are a growing expense for each homeowner, renting tenant, or business, continue to rise at a pace much faster than average inflation and average wage increases, South Africans will be getting progressively poorer. Less purchasing power in the pockets of the broader population will offset to lower spending and lower economic growth, a nasty cycle that South Africa can ill afford. Moving on to our next item, South Africa's 109 billion rand spending crisis. I mean, to be fair, everything is a spending crisis nowadays. So a leaked copy of an ANC Economic Transformation Committee document shows the major economic pressure faced by the state, with government still struggling to find 109 billion rand to spend on critical expenses, existing commitments, and budgeted costs. The Sunday Times this past week reported that the presentation was led by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana and was used to show why government cannot justify a basic income grant. Critical expenses that are yet to be paid and form part of the 109 billion rand figure include 15 billion rand to student debts for free education, 16.1 billion rand for provincial accruals and payables, 5 billion to rescue the land bank, another South African SOE that's busy failing, 3.21 billion rand to Denel, and 19.6 billion rand to cover public sector wage increases. The impending launch of a state bank requires another 10 billion to get off the ground, while 38 billion is required for costs that have been budgeted for but not yet paid. It is estimated by National Treasury that a basic income grant that paid out 595 rand per month would cost South Africa another 189 billion per year. Such a scheme is currently unrealistic, but that doesn't mean that government isn't going to try it anyway. Immigration as a red flag for the South African economy. The immigration of South Africa's skilled professionals is a major risk for job creation efforts, and the dwindling tax base cannot be ignored by policymakers as the country battles the aftermath of COVID-19 and one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. On Tuesday, Isak Smit, CEO of the Professional Provident Society, or PPS, a mutual financial services provider, red flagged the exodus of South Africa's most skilled workers who not only provide tax revenues but support jobs across the country. Speaking to Business Day after a virtual discussion at the Economic Society of South Africa's annual conference, Smith said that typically between 20 and 25% of professionals exiting PPS's insurance business and the professional medical scheme ProfMed, which PPS administers, cited immigration as their reason for doing so. Last year, across PPS's life insurance business, which covers about 130,000 professionals, about 600 of the 2.5 thousand members exiting listed immigration as a reason for leaving. Moving on to our next item, government is pushing ahead with basic income grant plans despite warnings. The government met Tuesday to discuss how to accelerate the country's economic recovery and consider the most feasible way to provide further welfare grants. The ANC has agreed in principle on the need for a basic income grant, and the government is now considering the most sustainable way to implement it. I don't think there is a sustainable way to implement it, but there we go. Finance Minister Godongwana warned in a presentation to ANC officials last week that the government has limited budget space to fund the party's project wish list. In addition to a range of social grants the government already offers, it introduced a special grant in July to mitigate against the effects of COVID-19 for those not currently receiving other payments. The cabinet will discuss whether or not the grant will be given to households or to individuals. There is now some frustration being shown by South Africa's asset managers, and this is from an article in the Financial Mail this past week, a column by Rob Rose. It is clear that some of South Africa's smartest asset managers are frustrated that the sun has failed to come up on President Ramaphosa's new dawn. This week, Alan Gray held its annual investment summit, and there was a palpable air of disappointment at the country's failure to relaunch after Ramaphosa took the reins in 2018. Duncan Artis, Chief Investment Officer at Alan Gray, put it best when he was asked how the private sector could do more to engage with government. He said, and I quote, "The real thing that people are looking for is action. Whenever you listen to a political speech, 90% of it is rubbish. It's just blah, 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 and no one ever does anything. People want to see action, not policies, not investment conferences. They want to see what you are doing because that's tangible," end quote. Artis had earlier alluded to the rising tide of political risk in South Africa and globally that is a byproduct of the cheap money flowing through the world. Artis wasn't alone in his disillusion with South Africa's government. Stanlib's Marius Oberholzer said that while there was some progress, such as SAA being sold to a private consortium, let's keep an eye on that, there needs to be far more evidence of economic reform to shift the narrative. Oberholzer said, and I quote, "Ramaphosa asked the business sector to tell a good story a couple of years ago, and he hasn't delivered. And so ultimately, CEOs have got to look after their capital," end quote. As Northam Platinum's Paul Dunn told the FM a few weeks ago, the critical job of a CEO is to attract capital and to decide how to allocate it. Get this wrong, and you failed. We've often said at the FMF, all the investment plans and schemes of government are all well and good, and they can keep on doing them. But if you don't implement radical pro-economic freedom reforms to attract investment and capital formation and business formation, you won't see a material difference in the country's fortunes. And so we shouldn't be surprised that people are now disappointed that the new dawn hasn't dawned, as it were, if you'll excuse the tortured metaphor. Moving on to our final item, the Fraser Institute released their 2021 Economic Freedom of the World Index this past week, and the Free Market Foundation, as a partner of the Fraser Institute, launched the South African edition on Tuesday. If you missed that event, you can go back on our YouTube channel and watch all of the presentations from there if you want more information. But just a quick summary: out of 165 countries and territories listed on the EFW, South Africa ranked 84th. In the year 2000, we were ranked 58th on the list of countries. An important and revealing factor in our decline in the rankings is that we have been overtaken by 15 former communist countries, and 7 African countries are ahead of us on the EFW. And as we like to say, the proof is in the pudding. If you implement pro economic freedom policies and ideas, on average, people's quality of life is better. They have a better shot at creating wealth for themselves, for their families, and their communities, as opposed to just going down the redistributionist government control route, where you force more and more people into dependence on the state, and you concentrate fixed wealth in the hands of only the politically elite. On that note, I will end for this week. I hope all of you have a great weekend ahead. Please look forward to joining us next week for more new episodes coming up. I hope all of you have a good weekend ahead, and we'll talk to you all again very soon. Until next time, take care.